I'm Kelsey McNair from North Park Beer Company. Here's your craft beer and brewing tip of the week. When it comes to water for any of these styles and kind of beer in general at North Park, where we've kind of positioned our beers, I like our water profile to be overall very soft. I think beer drinks cleaner and is more inviting for the next sip when that beer doesn't have a huge mineral presence. That isn't to say that there's no place for a little bit of coarse texture and how you achieve that. So kind of going through these different hoppy styles, when we're thinking about like West Coast Pils, definitely want the West Coast Pilsner to have a sharp kind of bitterness to it that's not necessarily reflected in the water profile. So we're trying to get more of that from the hops, and the water is going to be fairly low ppm target in the overall, but our chloride ratio could be as high as 6:1 with sulfate. Not like to the extreme that we've used so much calcium chloride and gypsum to bring the calcium levels to a very high point. We're generally below 100 on the calcium side. And so when we're building that water profile, it's to keep the overall water relatively soft. Moving to cold IPA, we're going to start to modulate those levels so that we've got more sulfate in there. We do want there to be a bit of a sharper expression. And then getting to West Coast, now we're at more of a 2:1 ratio of sulfate to chloride. So we've kind of flipped it around. And then as we get to hazy, we're still keeping it soft. The chloride levels are much more elevated at that point, and that could be 2:1 chloride to sulfate. And we do have a few different recipes for water specifically within each of these categories, and some of that might be influenced by the hop decisions that we're making, where we might want to dial back on some things because we may not want to introduce something like there could be a place for bicarbonate in a pale hoppy beer if you need some sort of an edge to it that adds some texture, that adds some coarseness, that might be also accentuated by the hop decisions that you're making further down the line. And so all these things interplay on a modular level to get to the end result, and it's all kind of thinking forward and backward with what decisions I'm making here are not just like a stop point for what I decide over there. Things I'm picking and choosing for this particular step are going to be purposeful with what I'm going to do later. To learn more about putting fully saturated flavor in hoppy beer styles, click the link below.